you want to start by downloading the image provided here. And we're going to practice all of our selection tools here on this image. So I want to hit the download button. And with Photoshop already opened, I want to drag and drop onto the Photoshop workspace. So the first tool I'm going to go over is here we have our toolbar over here on the left-hand side. So I'm going to start by showing you guys the first tool down here. So this first tool is the move tool, if you haven't already known, but we have nothing to move. So we're going to start with the rectangular marquee tool. So anytime you see this little white little arrow here, that means that there's other tools hidden under here. So if I simply just hold down my mouse click, you'll see that we have other tools here. So let's start with the rectangular marquee tool. And I'm going to first start by zooming in with Control+. And now I'm going to hold down my space bar, and you'll see my mouse icon turns into a hand. That's the grab icon. I'm going to click and drag up to this window here. So here I have an example of where I want to repair these or these window panes. So I'm going to use the rectangular marquee because I am working with rectangles. So I'm actually going to grab this window pane. So I'm going to click and drag out a rectangle, and you'll see it looks like kind of marching ants, like little ants kind of dashed lines moving. So that's kind of the nickname for a selection. So here I have these pixels selected. I'm going to hit Control C as in copy to copy my selection. And now I'm going to hit Control V to paste. When I do that, you're going to see over here to the right, this is called our layers panel. A layer called layer 1 pops up. I want to name this because if I grab my move tool here, now that I have something to move, you'll see that I'm grabbing this layer. I'm going to name this layer by double clicking. I want to title it Window Pane 1. And I'm going to click and move this using my move tool down here. And you'll see here that it doesn't quite fit. So anytime you want to resize a layer or an image, you hit Control T. What Control T does is the shortcut to transform an image. So I hit Control T for Control Transform, and I could like change my image. I can kind of flip it if I wanted. But I'm simply just going to kind of drag it downward to fit this image a little better. I might drag this over a little bit. So see how it kind of fits that a little bit better visually. It's not perfect, but get it as best as you can. And I'm going to hit Enter. If you do not hit Enter and you go to use your move tool again, it's going to ask you to apply, or sometimes it won't even do anything. So if you see those little brackets when you're in Control, that means you can't. You're in transform mode, so you can't do anything. So anyway, I'm going to hit Enter, and now we have this little part overlapping. So I'm going to use my rectangular marquee again, and I'm going to click, and I'm just going to grab here, and I'm going to hit the Delete key. Okay, so we're going to delete that because we don't need those pixels. I might even move in a little bit more, so that way we have a little bit more of that edge. If you were to mess up, let's say if I go like too far, and I hit delete, and I'm like, oh, I messed up. You want to hit Control Z on your keyboard. If you hit, and then if that usually goes back and forth. If you want to go back multiple steps, you want to hit Control Alt Z, and you can go back a lot of steps. So I'll just kind of leave it at this, but keep in mind that you can only do Control Z about 12 times. If you do a whole lot of stuff, eventually you can only go back in history so many times. So here I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this window pane. So I'm going to right click over on this layer, and I'm going to hit Duplicate Layer. And we're going to title this Window Pane 2. I'm going to grab my move tool. I have window pane 2 selected, and I'm going to move that over. So it looks like sometimes Photoshop will want to snap to certain pixels. If you don't like it snapping, you can go up to View and turn off Snap. And you'll see that it moves more seamlessly. So this isn't perfect, but I think for the sake of this assignment, we can move this over. I can hit Control T. This window pane is going to be a hard one to work with. So there are actually tools that we could use to fix this, but it'll be really difficult. So we're just going to leave it here. All right, so now that we're done with this, let's move over. So I'm going to push my space bar and click and grab. For this one, I'm going to hit Control minus and zoom out a little bit so I can see the whole entire picture. Now what I'm going to do is I want to select this balloon here. So I'm going to now click and hold here and move on to my elliptical marquee. And if I were to go in and try to select my balloon, here's a mistake that you're going to see happen. If I go to Control C, it cannot complete the copy command because selected area is empty. Well, the reason being is if you look over here on your layers panel, it has window pane 2 selected, which is that. There is literally no pixels over here. So I'm going to hit Control D to deselect, and we would need to make sure that this background picture is selected. So that way when we click and pull out the elliptical marquee, it works. So this one is a little bit tricky because where you pull out your circle, it's hard to get it to be perfect. So here's the trick. So I'm just going to kind of click here, pull out. I'm going to hold down before I unclick my mouse. I'm going to push a space bar, and with my mouse clicked and my space bar held down, it allows me to move my selection. So I'm going to line it up. I'm going to undo my space bar, and I'm going to move this selection over a little bit, push space bar down again. I might adjust this. All right, so this is good. So this requires kind of back and forth between spacebar, pushing that down. So now that I'm fully done with adjusting my selection, I'm going to unclick my mouse. So that finalizes my selection. So here in this picture, I want to create multiples. So I'm going to hit Control C to copy it. And I'm going to hit Control V to paste. I'm going to move this over. You'll see I made a copy of it. So I'm going to hit Control T because I actually want to make this a little bit smaller. I'm going to go ahead and title this layer Balloon Copy. I'm going to duplicate it. Move another one over here. Alright, so that's how you use the elliptical marquee tool. Now I'm going to move down here to the star image. And I'm going to make sure when I start on a new image, I need my background selected. And the next tool we're going to go over is we're going to stop here with the marquee tools. I usually don't find the single row marquee or the single column very useful. So next we're going to switch over to the lasso tool. So it'll be this first one here in the menu. For this one, I just want you to draw any sort of organic shape, because sometimes when you're trying to select something, it doesn't have to be a geometric shape. Like you could do something abstract such as this. With this little organic shape drawn out, I want you to go down here on your layers panel. This is called your adjustment layer button. And we're going to change the hue. That's another name for color. So I'm going to select hue. This little panel is going to pop up. If you slide over this hue panel, you can see that selection that I created is able to be changed. So I'm just going to exaggerate this. So when you do this, exaggerate it enough so I can see that you know how to use the lasso tool. Okay, and you'll see that it creates a layer for that color change. So again, spacebar to move over. Now I'm going to switch back to my background layer, and the next tool is the polygonal lasso. So the polygonal reminds you of polygon. So here sometimes we have an irregular geometric shape. So here we just have the straight edge shape that's fairly geometric, that it'd be very hard to freehand draw with the lasso tool. This one works by you click and it anchors down kind of like a rope. That's like the end of your lasso. And you want to click on each of these corners, because our goal here is to select this roof, and we're going to change the color of it. So I'm just clicking on each of these corners. If you mess up, double click in one spot and start again. Now with this, you have to click on the very first point you made. So you can see there's a circle here. That means you're closing the shape. So I'm going to click and it activates my selection. So again, I'm going to go down here to the adjustment layer icon, and we're going to change the hue. So change the color of this roof to something other than the color that you see. You can exaggerate it a bit, so that way I know you've used a polygonal lasso. Okay, we're going to switch down to the leaf. Select your background. Next tool is our magnetic lasso. I want to zoom in with Control+, because the trick is to this one is you want to be zoomed in so that way you have good control of your mouse. With this one, you have to be very careful because we're going to click and we're going to carefully trace around this mouse. And what the magnetic lasso tries to do is it sticks to edges of pixels that are a certain value. So I'm going to click and I'm carefully going to trace. If you mess up, say if you go all over the place, click in one spot, hit Control D to deselect. I'll click, slowly trace around this leaf. Sometimes if it's not clicking or snapping to your values, you can click with your mouse and you can manually put down a little point for it to stick to. So around here, it's going to be kind of hard for it because some of the background will be like a lighter value, just like the leaf, and it'll try to snap to that. So this one does take some time. You want to be patient with it. If you miss a tiny little spot or a corner, don't worry about it. Because you can see here, there's a few spots that I'm not being super picky about, but you do want to get most of it. The faster you go, the more inaccurate it's going to be. Alright, and then I want to go to that first point. You should see a circle. Click and it activates your selection. So let's then go Adjustment Panel, Hue Saturation, and you want to change the color of your leaf. Okay. So you can see here there's a few spots that I missed, but overall this is acceptable. So I'm going to move on to the next one, select my background layer. The next set of tools are these selection tools. So here we have Quick Selection. As this name suggests, it is a very quick selection tool, and usually quick doesn't necessarily the most accurate. So how I'm changing the size of the selection tool is with my bracket keys on my keyboard. So on my keyboard, next to the P key, you're going to see brackets. Another way to change it is, if you prefer, up here, there's the size of your brush here. Okay, you can see I can make it smaller or larger. So I usually start with a kind of a large brush here on large areas. I'm kind of clicking, dragging around. As I click, I can add to my selection. Now let's say I accidentally select some of that background. So right now you see in the middle of my cursor is a plus sign. That's means I'm adding to my selection. If I hold down the Alt key, I can click on areas that I do not want, and you'll see it'll update that. So now that I'm getting kind of little smaller parts of the image, I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. So I'm going to type the backward bracket key, or you could change it up here. And I'm going to kind of add some of these little areas to my image. I'm going to hold down Alt and remove these parts. Spacebar to move over. Alright, so this looks fairly good. Now I want to change the color of this this telescope. So again, adjustment layer, hue, and change the color of this to be something that definitely wasn't when you started. Okay. I'm going to move down. Our final tool is one of the best selection tools, and this is probably a selection tool that you'll use the most. This is called the Magic Wand. So the Magic Wand is how it works. So I want to make sure on my background layer, I want to select this background. Now when I select, you'll see if I were to try to select, it keeps resetting. So the trick of the Magic Wand is I want to click, and if I want to add to my selection, I want to hold down the Shift key. So I'm going to hold down Shift and click on the areas that I want to add to my selection. So hold on, let me reset my Magic Wand. It's being crazy. So Shift, you'll see your Shift, when you hold down Shift, okay, so now it's working properly. When I hold down Shift, you'll see a plus sign. That means you're adding to your Magic Wand. Up here at the top, you have tolerance. If you have a tolerance that is, say, 5, you'll see that it's a lot more picky and it will take a lot more to add. This will be, changing the tolerance comes in handy for certain cases. The higher the tolerance, if I have this set to 200, it selects way too much. Okay, so the higher the tolerance, the less picky it is. 30 is usually a good number to keep your tolerance set at. So I'm going to click Shift. I'm going to zoom in because you'll see that there will be a few parts that you want to add kind of in between the trees. You want to go around. You don't need to get every little bit bit and part, but you want to get more most of the bigger parts. All right, so from here I want to change the hue and saturation again. Change it to something that is kind of a lot different than what was there before. Oh, I can see that you used it appropriately. So the Magic Wand selects pixels when its tolerance is set to 30. When you click on one pixel, it will select 30 pixels that are the same color and value. That's kind of how it calculates what to select, is based on color and value. So when you are done with all of these, I want you to go to File, Save As. You do not want to save into your downloads. Save to your computer, in your U drive. You can keep it Photoshop Selection Tools and hit Save. And then you can upload it to Classroom.